guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Squatter parked his car and caravan on farmer's property without permission. Farmer gets revenge with a forklift. Never mess with a farmer. TLDR. Man, parks car and caravan on my property and when I ask him to leave doesn't listen. I use a forklift to move his car and find it back on my land the following day. When he is still asleep, I pick up his car and dump it in the mud. Then when lifting his caravan, he wakes up inside of it and starts to freak out. I dump that in the mud too and tell him that messing with a farmer is a bad idea and if he comes back, I will dump him somewhere worse. A polite request should be listened to because the next time it isn't going to be polite, and it isn't going to be a request. Never mess with a farmer unless you want to go up against him and the forklift that he keeps in his barn. When will people learn that messing with a farmer will always be a bad idea because of the skills we possess and the no-nonsense attitude that we grow up with? Well, clearly this guy didn't get the memo but did after realizing that messing with me was a bad idea. He isn't the first person to do something like this though because people come into my land with cars and caravans all the time. For those of you in other parts of the world that don't know what a caravan is, it is kind of like an RV but not as fancy and gets towed by the car. My guess is that people want to go on a rural vacation and decide that parking on mine and other farmers' properties is a good idea. While some drive away after a nice and polite talk, others decide that they want to push our buttons. This guy was one of those. I was walking back to my house when I was done for the day and noticed yet another car and caravan parked on my property. I walked over and saw that nobody was in the car and whoever it was must have settled down in his caravan already. So, I knock on that and out walks a young man with a scraggy beard that kind of smells like beer. This was the sort that I was used to dealing with the most often, single young guys that wanted to go out and find themselves in nature or something like that. Since they grew up in a city or suburb though actual nature scares them and they end up right here on my property. Me. This is my property, you need to move. Man. Back off man. You can't tell me where to park my stuff. Me. I can when this is my land, and you have no rights to be here. Man. Your land? This is nature buddy. Nobody can come and claim nature as being their land. It is for everybody. Me. I'm giving you one last warning, get off of my property or I am going to make you get off. Man. I would like to see you try. It was clear talking wasn't getting anywhere with this guy, so I gave up on that and went inside to have my dinner. I wanted to give him a chance to think about it, maybe sober up a little, and realize that he needed to leave. When I looked and saw he was still there though and the lights in the caravan were off, I decided to take matters into my own hands. This guy clearly wanted to be a squatter and having dealt with them in the past I knew that if I didn't get him off of my land soon, he was going to become a major pest. Now one reason that you shouldn't mess with farmers is they have a lot of equipment, and they know how to use it. In this case I had a forklift that I wasn't afraid to use to get the point across to him. I didn't want to actually cause damage because I'm not that kind of guy. I just wanted to get the point across. I used my forklift to pick up his car and place it outside of my land. He could still see it from where he was, but I placed it in a nice pile of mud as a little bit of revenge. I honestly thought when he woke up and saw it, he would get the message and leave. Around lunchtime though I saw his car was back on my property right where it was before, only now muddy. It was clear he wanted to play games and I needed to take things up a notch. Still, I didn't want to damage anything, so if anyone was hoping my next step was to crush his car or something, I'm sorry to disappoint. I want to teach him a lesson, not go to jail for destruction of property. Anyway, another thing about farmers is that we wake up a whole lot earlier than most people from the city do. So, when I woke up the next morning the man was still dead to the world asleep in his caravan. I got my forklift and once again put his car outside my property, this time letting the mud splash a little bit more. Then it was time for the caravan. I lifted it up with the forklift and started to move it off my property. All of the noise and jostling obviously woke him up because when he looked out the window and saw that he was off the ground and moving he started freaking out. I had on protective gear so I couldn't really hear what I was saying, just the faint noise of him yelling and what I assume was cursing. He was probably scared out of his mind from this whole thing, and I was having fun making some unnecessary movements to make him sway a little and feel like he could fall at any moment. For all he knew, my plan was to drop him from a big height or put him into a lake or a giant hole. While those options would have been funny, it would also have kept him here longer, which was the opposite of my goal. So instead, I just dumped him off of my property next to his car in the mud. I think the most satisfying thing was him getting out of the caravan and having to end up walking through the thick mud as got on his pants, and I would guess into his shoes even. For me, something like that is the best revenge of all. That was when he turned to look at me in the forklift and I was waiting for him to say something. He didn't though, so I decided I would start off talking to explain to him why he should never mess with me or another farmer again. Me. I warned you to get off of my property. We don't take kindly to squatters around here, and if I ever see you trying to squat here again, I promise that I will dump your car and caravan somewhere a lot worse than the mud. By the time I get back from the barn, you better hope that I don't see you here again. I didn't even give him a chance to respond, and instead I just drove the forklift back to the barn where I keep the equipment and get it stored away properly. I had a feeling I wasn't going to need it again for a while if his face was anything to go off of. When I got back, I was right, and the young guy was nowhere to be seen, and honestly the only evidence he was there was the marks in the mud that his car and caravan left. I don't regret what I did, and honestly if I was to regret anything it would be not mixing some fresh manure courtesy of my stock into that mud too. Like I said at the beginning, he isn't the first guy to do something like this, and he probably won't be the last. Most people realize though that when an angry farmer tells you to get off of his land or else, he means it. We don't threaten lightly, and squatting on our land isn't going to end well for anybody. I doubt he messed with any farmers after that, and might have even given up his idea to live among nature, once he realized that doing so would mean actual nature and not the yard of someone's farm. The next story is titled, "Haven't been a member for years, but I'm going to cast my vote to prevent them from making it mandatory." I bought my house in this former retirement community just over 10 years ago, and at the time the HOA was voluntary. It's the kind of neighborhood where there are 5 to 6 subdivisions of 200 to 300 houses, each act independent, but they are all the same, just with a different name. The HOA is $55 a month and covers irrigation and access to the community pool. The trouble is, it rains a lot here, and we are literally within walking distance of a water park where you can get an annual pass for something like $20 a month. I water my yard maybe 10 times over the course of each winter, and my yard is just as green and lush as every other. Well, I've been flagged down by 3 neighbors in the last 2 days to be told I need to cast my vote. Evidently, the HOA runners are upset at such low participation. Something like 115 out of 300 houses are members, and so they just decided the first step was to increase dues to $65, with the next step to be making membership mandatory and increase dues again to $75, with no change to benefits. They've actually cut off the irrigation because they claim they can't afford it anymore. Their claim is that they've been running the HOA at a loss for years and are out of options. I'd honestly rather they bulldoze the clubhouse and sell the property. Now, I generally don't like HOA. I've seen some of these posts, and I'm just generally of the opinion that whatever benefits an HOA can offer are outweighed by the risks and can be attained by myself without the middlemen. I've only had one run-in with my HOA, when I mentioned getting a new roof to my neighbor, and the HOA czar, whatever title, was there and said to make sure I get whatever tile color approved prior to ordering. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "I'll pick out whatever the hell I want, and I dare you to try to do something about it." This was a guy I'd never said a word to before warning me about picking out a pink roof. Anyways, I figured this sub may appreciate my thinking of future residents and going to cast my vote to prevent them from trapping future homeowners in their HOA. Duck them. Edit. Okay people, just stop. I wasn't asking for the laws of different states or countries. I was just sharing what I thought was an interesting story about something that will probably turn into absolutely nothing, but may have a meaty turn if fuckery is afoot. Please, stop telling me to talk to a lawyer, and stop giving me advice that indicates you haven't even read the post. I can appreciate that some of it is well-meaning, but I'm thoroughly over-explaining to people that I own my home, that I'm not, and never have been a member of the HOA, and that I fully plan to read the bylaws prior to voting, lest there be some hidden clause everyone seems to fear that would Rumpelstiltskin me into a member. I appreciate so many people are so eager to offer their opinions and/or advice, but this is the internet, you all know I can't trust a single thing anyone says, right? The last story is titled, I was able to simultaneously gain a $30K per year pension for my mother while wiping my piece of crap father's retirement. TLDR. Got my mother a pension that she was actually awarded in a divorce. My dad had been overpaid for 10 years, had to answer for it. My father is the Canadian Satan. Growing up with him was less than fun, and I can assure you, based on witnessing it, he was a less than fun husband. I'd go on about what a piece of crap my father is, but instead I'll quote a judge. You're the most despicable human I've ever had in my courtroom, and that's coming from a family court judge. I read this whining endorsement of my dad's personality in the court documents I acquired related to his divorce with my mom. The same place I discovered the fuckery he had engaged in to steal from my mom. It's also where I found the information. I needed to get one over on him so severely he's going to disinherit me. This is a bit of a long read, so TLDR at the bottom. A frame of reference about my father is that he's a pathological narcissist and behaves exactly how those people are compelled to act. They aren't generous people, and punching them in the wallet is like a slapshot to the taint from Gretzky. He's kind of like Donkey from Shrek, but also Joseph Stalin, a monstrous jackass. Chapter 1 Hosea chapter 3 verse 8. Those that sow the wind shall reap a whirlwind. Our actions always have consequences, and my padre has plenty to answer for. My attempts to hold him to account didn't jump to immediate jihad, they started with diplomacy and a therapist. About 10 months ago, when our tale begins, I was going through some stuff. Stuff being a whole lot of PTSD related to both my dad's abuse and my job as a paramedic. He did a ton that affected me deeply, things that I needed to move past, along with all that other razzmatazz from 15 years of EMS. In so trying to move past and work through everything, I quit drinking, started turning my untreated PTSD into treated PTSD, and thinking having my dad involved might help me in our relationship. Well, I seriously ducking misjudged that one, so you'll probably be unsurprised to hear that conversation went swimmingly. I'll spare you the lurid detail, but when I broached the subject with him, our back and forth degenerated into visceral hate, with him screaming at me that I'm a failed paramedic, liar and piece of crap alcoholic. While I have a certain pride about my job, I have more pride in my 14-month sobriety, so hearing this from my old man might have caused me to behave a bit psychotically. I got right pissed off at him. I decided to dig up every bit of dirt I could, see what kind of man he actually is and has been. When it was convenient, I hoped in the mystery machine before taking a trip to the courthouse to unleash my inner gumshoe. Everything is public record, so I bulk bought copies before retiring to my easy chair to read, plot and pet my white long-haired cat. For good measure, I obtained a file of divorce document from my mother. Soon enough I hit upon a line of inquiry worth following up on. It seems that during the final settlement of my parents' divorce, 2002, my mother was awarded 1/3 of my father's employment pension. She was a stay-at-home mother and could not earn one herself, so it was given to her by a judge. Mighty ducking strange, because my father, as he brags, took a nearly full pension and retired a bit early. No way that asshat was living the last 10 years after retiring early on a 2/3 pension. He isn't constantly batching about it. So, I asked my mother if she was collecting a pension from his job or had cashed out the value, $100K plus at the time, 20 years ago, no to both questions. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if that's collectible on, and what 20 years of compound interest from a pension fund makes it worth. Well, I did eventually find out, along with the fact that my dear old dad had been collecting my mother's portion for 10 years, in hilariously open violation of a legal order from a judge. Why didn't my mother pursue this sooner? A combination of being unable to afford a lawyer, being his victim for 20 years, and pessimism after so much of his continued dodging obligation to the order. She just quit. There is effectively no statute of limitations he could hide behind because the wording of the settlement. Insofar as I could tell, I had him dead to rights and my mother would be collecting. It would be a slam dunk. I just needed to hire a lawyer to help me, so I set out to find the most unbalanced, bloodthirsty psychotic who passed the bar exam. Chapter 2 at 2 Pension Lady? As it says in the good book, screw unto others as they would screw unto you, so that's what I set out to do. The misanthropic sociopath I hired for legal counsel suggested we send a demand letter to the pension office to try and remedy it before filing what would undoubtedly be an easy win for him. I agreed in spirit and instead phoned up the pension office and got put through to the woman managing my father's file. Well, she was a delight, and it was a trivial matter for me to get her to loathe my dad. We talked for 45 minutes, and I swear if you'd given me another hour, I could have convinced her to suicide bomb his house. In all our conversations about life, families and relationships, we got down to some things of note. Since I could show her correspondence, her office had sent to my father, CC'd my mum on, some years ago and ongoing for 5 consecutive years, trying to resolve this matter, which he had ignored, she was more than willing to start the process on remedy immediately. Full cooperation from this lady and her office was a matter of merely providing documentation, and with my lawyer on retainer, this office was beyond asking my father to comply. They complied for him. About 2 months since I last spoke to my father, and he now had no idea his pension was about to take a serious hit. Below I'm going to break down how big a turd I put into his bowl of ice cream. My mother's portion was made whole and adjusted to reflect that her portion was brought to maturity and beyond, so his early retirement doesn't affect her fund. So, he loses 10 years of valuation to her. He also retired 3 years early, which knocks him down now to 17 years of pension valuation, not 27. If you'd forgotten, my dad had been collecting my mum's money and was overpaid by $30,000 per year for the last 10 years. Like I said, mom was made whole, so the pension company is going to claw back that overpayment from the base valuation of his current pension fund. I'm not exactly sure what that does to the number, but it effectively nerfs my old man's private retirement fund. He's got government old age pension, that he took early too, whoops. My dad did some awful crap to me, but I only had to suffer 17 years of him. My mum still has the high score at 20. As much as I did this for spite and malicious glee, I did do it to give my mum a chance for a proper retirement. Chapter 3: Glitter Bombs of Justice. My mother started collecting her pension about 3 months after I contacted the pension office, and to celebrate, she bought tickets to New Zealand for the family for Christmas, so we can see our relatives. I was able to get most of my retainer from the lawyer back, and to celebrate I went online to order a glitter bomb. I was able to ship it to my old man anonymously from another country, God bless the USA. I heard through my sister he opened it up in his stupid red Miata, ha ha ha, he'll never get rid of it. Thank you for listening.